going to bring into the conversation now Admiral James Stavridis. He's a retired four-star admiral. He served from 2009 to 2013 as Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He's now Chief International Security and Diplomacy Analyst for NBC News. Admiral, thank you very much for being with us. We're honored to have you with us here tonight.
Thanks a lot. Good to be with everybody.
When you look at these pictures tonight, just big picture, when you consider the fact that the President of the United States, for the first time in history, has decided to bring this pariah state into the community of nations, or at least into an equal relationship with the president, with this sort of a meeting, what's your overall reaction about this moment in history?
Before I even get to that, Rach, I just want to point out we've really gone from the sublime to the ridiculous in the coverage, in the sense that Michael Beschloss absolutely correctly says we may look at this as a real pivot point in history, and then we default to the, hey, who's paying the hotel bill? And I think that is a pretty good example of what we're seeing here. It's hard to score this one at this point, but if you ask me to put kind of a percentage on it, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, call it 70% chance that over time, if we're patient, this could lead to a real diffusion of tension and possibly a reduction in nuclear weapons. Here's the bad news. I think there's a 20–25% chance that it just defaults back to the old way of doing business, and there's still going to be a 5 to 10% chance that the wheels really come off and we end up in a war-fighting situation. But for this moment, we ought to enjoy the day. This is a good moment for diplomacy compared to where we were 6 months ago. I'll take it.
When the president, or at least the Secretary of State, talk about offering security guarantees to North Korea, what does that mean in civilian language? What are they talking about in terms of assurances that we could give their leader or their country in terms of their security?
Yeah, great question. What Kim Jong-un will look for is first statements. Those are not particularly reassuring to him, but he'll want at least in writing that we are not going to seek to change the regime. More importantly, he will look for a reduction in military exercises between the United States and South Korea. He'll look for a reduction in Japanese military activity around the peninsula. He'll look for a reduction in our reconnaissance flights. He'll look for a reduction in our strategic bombers, which can operate from great ranges over the peninsula. And ultimately, what he's after is a significant reduction in the 28,000 U.S. troops that are on that peninsula. He's got a shopping list. He'll work down that list. Our job is to not give in to that until we see absolute, verifiable, irreversible reduction and ultimately dispatch of those nuclear weapons on the peninsula.
The president repeatedly, and even from before he was a public figure in political life, has criticized the long-term presence of U.S. troops overseas in places like South Korea, where we've got tens of thousands of American troops stationed, as you know, obviously. If the North Koreans are going to use the summit to push for reductions in those things you're just describing, in military exercises, in reconnaissance flights, in the presence of those nuclear-capable B-52s, if they're going to push for that, how much could the U.S. give on those issues before there was a material effect on our national security and that of our closest allies, the South Koreans and Japanese in particular, for whom we've accepted responsibility to protect them?
We absolutely have, and these are treaty allies, Rachel. South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan in the Pacific. And so as we draw down our forces there, we do open up our national security concerns. And we ought to remember our troops are there not as an act of goodwill to South Korea. They're there to enhance U.S. influence in the region, to ensure that we keep those sea lanes of communication open, that our trade can flow freely, that we have a voice in the events there, for the exact same reason that we still have about 50,000 troops in Europe. They're not there as an act of goodwill. They're there to accomplish U.S. national security objectives. So we draw them down at risk to those objectives, and it is very short-sighted to say, oh, yeah, this will be a twofer. We can reduce tension and save some money by getting our troops off the peninsula. Not the right way to think about this one.
Retired Admiral James Stavridis, who is the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Pleasure to have you with us tonight, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.